Hello, I'm Richard Raffan. In this video you're going to see me using the 1-inch skew chisel, and I cover the basic cuts. You'll see peeling, shear cuts to get a smooth cylinder, V-grooves and cutting beads, and you'll see it from the top and the side. And this video is really to help people who are struggling with the skew and having catches and that kind of thing. My skew chisels are ground with a very slight radius here, which I find much more useful than a straight edge for the kind of work I do. The angle of the bevel, according to this little gauge, is 22 degrees pretty much. It slices very nicely. For very hard wood I'd probably have a slightly steeper bevels. This is a 3/4 inch 19mm skew. Happens to be made by Robert Sorby. It was given to me the other day. I've softened the edges here, but it's not the tool I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be using this one, which is a Henry Taylor, and this one again, as you can see, has a very slight radius. The angle of the skew is about 10 to 15 degrees off square. I find if they're any steeper than that, they're much more difficult to use. And on this one I forgot to soften the edges, but I'm using this one just because you can see more what's happening than you can with the slightly smaller one. This is a 1-inch skew chisel used for a peeling cut. Not straight in on the radius, which is a scrape. Makes a different noise. And leaves a terrible surface. This is the same peeling cut from above. This is a very dry old bit of jacaranda. This is a more general view with a small ash log, fairly dry, tool on the wrist, and notice the angle at which I have the tool. The rest is actually about 1/2 inch above center, so I'm feeling comfortable holding the tool near the ferrule, just like an extension of my arm. This is a piece of silky oak, Grevillea robusta. So the peeling cuts to get it pretty well round. There's still a few little kind of flat areas there, there and there. So with a slightly curved radius, I can then use that tool at the same angle, or I can raise the handle very slightly, so it's very slightly lower. I'm still not scraping. Scraping is a different noise. And that's because it leaves a different surface. You can see the difference here. The scraped surface has more of the fibers pulled out. Here they're pulled out a bit, but it's sandable, fairly easily sandable, whereas this requires much heavier grits. Now from here I can then go into shear cuts. Tool on the rest, the bevel shoulder on the wood. Raise the handle until there's some dust up on the edge and then move forward. Going in the other direction, turn the tool over. So a quick explanation of what is happening, or what we're trying to do. The constant in wood turning is the wood always coming down onto the tool. And if you hold that edge at around 45 degrees, you should get a nice curly shaving. Now for the moment, when you start, just think in terms of keeping the point of the cut, the part of the tool cutting, in the leading half, and that way you should control the leverage. When you're cutting the leading half, the line here is pretty well in line with the fulcrum where the tool is sitting on the rest. In under here there's space because this tool just rests on the long lower side. If you let the point of the cut, let the wood come down on to the long point, there's space under there and that will grab. And there is another video specifically on catches with a skew chisel, so I'd urge you to watch that. So with the long point up, I've got a shaving there. With the long point down, I have a very similar kind of shaving. Long point up, the edge is around 45 degrees to the oncoming wood. Same the other way. Long point down. Again, 45 degrees, maybe a little bit steeper to the oncoming wood. When you're cutting with the tool long point up, any pressure you put into the cut is going directly against the axis, and when a blank gets much thinner, that leads to chatter. Whereas if you have the long point down, any pressure you put into the cut tends to be absorbed by the headstock, by the drive, and you're much less likely to get chatter. I just find it much easier to do it that way. This is the long point up, this is the long point down. I am right-handed and I keep the tool in my right hand. I find turning quite difficult enough without being ambidextrous. And that's pretty much what you get when you've got a good planing. So here we are from the side. long point up, tool on the wrist, bevel on the wood. Now if I let that bevel come off the wood, I'm getting some chattering. And that's when I get the cleanly cut ridges. And if you've got a fairly grubby hand, you can normally kind of rub it across and highlight the tops of the ridges. So you eliminate those by keeping the bevel on the wood. Right, long point down, long point down. And if I raise the handle, again, I'm going to get juddering. Not quite so much this time with the tool that way round, but still not a clean cut. I can use the corner of the tool. That just gets under the end grain and prizes it up. Doesn't look particularly pretty, but it does a very clean job, clean cut. I'll turn the tool over and go the other way, do the same thing. This completely round. Well, I can hear, except for the very end, there was a little knocking. That's still flat. The rest is round. Cutting V-grooves from the side. The tool rest here is above center, so I'm comfortable. So to bring the tool into the wood, I mark the center of the V-groove by pivoting the edge into the wood and then coming in from either side. So that's pivoting the tool into the wood. If the rest is very low, you still do the same thing, it's just not so comfortable for me. But if I was shorter in relation to center height, then I'd probably feel more comfortable the rest down here. If I was taller, I would have the rest much higher. You do not kind of have the tool horizontal and just poke it straight in. The idea is to line the bevel up with the direction you want to go, which is in at that angle. And then pivot the tool into the rest on that line. Now we'll have a look at that from the top. So we start the V-groove by making on the center with the long point and then in from either side. And you have your hand over the top. Or I can also hold it from underneath. Thumb acting as a kind of lateral fulcrum. the wood. You think in terms of using just the point of the tool, just the long point, and keeping the bevel side in contact with the wood. So the main aim is to keep the edge clear of the bit you've just cut. So into the wood, I've lined the bevel up with the direction I want to go, get into the wood, and then ease the tool forward. Into the wood through an arc, and then ease the tool forward. You don't need to push hard. You're waiting for the wood to come to the tool, not pushing the tool into the wood. So we come down here and do the same thing. Now this time we're going to have a catch. So I'm safe when I have the bevel side rubbing the wood only. But if I let this portion of the wood touch the edge, it's basically an unsupported edge, and that's going to happen every time. That was only a small one, but still mucks up your nice little groove. Just do that on the other side. So if I come in here, there's space in between the edge and the bit I've just cut. So I have to let the tool roll back to there, bang. And that's really what terrifies people about the skew. But it really pays to practice having a few of these catches so you can control them, and that helps you understand why the tool is catching. Just a side view of cutting grooves and beads. Here's how the tool's arcing into the wood. It's not just going straight forward. It's not a pull shot. Put my hand right over. The main thing is to stop the tool sliding around as you make the entry cut into the wood. I can also have my finger underneath the rest, thumb on the side, acting as the side of the tool acting as a kind of lateral fulcrum. Those are the grooves. Cutting a square section to round. It's a 1-inch skew chisel, long point down. The only portion of the tool which is in contact with the wood is the bevel side. Think in terms of keeping the bevel side rubbing against the wood and using the point, the long point. So going across center, Don't even try to get the point right to the center, which you're likely to miss. As you come into center, raise the handle, so you're using the section of the edge just behind the point. On the end grain, if you want to make any marks, you can use the skew flat on the rest and just ease the corner long point into the wood. If you use the tool flat on the rest, just to shape a bead, it's going to sound pretty nasty and it's going to look terrible. And that is the difference. So it really pays to learn how to use the skew. It saves you so much money in abrasives apart from anything else. So we have the shear cut. You adjust the corner of the tool. Take that away for a minute and you can see the difference here. And that's just taking the corner of the tool into the wood. It prizes up the end grain. Doesn't look very nice when it's going along. Kind of prise up the fibers, but there's a very clean cut right behind. There's a shear cut behind that. And that is the sort of surface you'll never ever get off any kind of carbide tip, which is scraping. Tool on the rest, bevel shoulder on the wood. You're perfectly safe there. Now you have two options here. One is to use the edge, and the other is to use the corner. Now the trouble with, to my mind, using the corner is by the time you get that far, you can't really see what you're doing. So I then take the tool away, bring the bevel side into rub on the bit I've just cut, and carry on with the long point, where you get a better view of what you're doing. Going the other way, use the short corner. And as the tool comes along the rest, you're rolling the tool over. You're not really swiveling it around and pointing it like you might a gouge if you're hollowing a bowl. Along the rest and roll it as you go. Now this time I can see what I'm doing, but often I'll turn the tool over and use the long point. Now there's a teeny little ridge up on the top, and I generally get rid of that with a very light peeling cut. But I also know that 180 grit would also take care of it. So I'll have another go here. This time I'm going to use the portion of the edge just behind the corner of the tool. This is pretty hard, dry timber, harder than I'd really like for demos. But you come up with a nice surface either way, so that's cut with the corner, and this is cut just behind the corner, just up the edge a little bit. Just do that last one again up here. Full shear cut. Now, I'm well out of practice with the skew. I haven't really used it as a production tool for about 20 years. Do one up here. Long point. Just do a little peeling cut. But that's the absolute basics of cutting grooves and beads, and after that it's all practice. And you'd be well advised to get greener timber than this. A nice branch of green timber is much easier to turn, and more of a pleasure as a result.